All right, I want to welcome everybody to another episode of the Shadows Podcast. I'm your host, Trip Bodenheimer. I am anxious to see how this episode goes. This was something that we kind of threw together super last minute, meaning like as of this morning and throughout the day, we have just been messaging each other back and forth, and we're like, hey, we down for doing this? But Nathan Coy is my guest today, and sir, welcome to the Shadows Podcast.
Man, Trip, thank you so much for having me. I'm anxious, I'm excited. I've got all these words and emotions going through me right now, but excited would be the one to just take the cake.
Yeah, there we go. And the funny thing is, he was asking. I'm totally gonna air the laundry on here. He was asking, what do I need to do to get prepared for this? And I was like, it's on you. It's all about you. So he's got all his notes in front of him. He's got his birth certificate, his passport, everything ready to go. In case
Mother's maiden name.
Yep. In case anything gets asked, he has that folder from the house with all the important information. But you are located in Charleston, South Carolina. How's the weather there?
Man, absolutely beautiful today. It was nice, 72 degrees. I went out for a 4-mile run at the beginning of the day.
Yeah.
And then tonight it'll drop down to 32. So we'll see what happens at that point.
Yeah, we had a tornado warning all around here last night. And I was telling you before we got started, I was recording with someone and I was just fingers crossed that the tornado, I had the most fickle Wi-Fi service anywhere. And I was just praying that it didn't go out on me, and it stood up. But yeah, it's been nasty weather over here in Alabama. But yeah, I think I talked to you about this. I lived in Mount Pleasant for a while.
Mount Pleasant's beautiful. Oh my goodness, today's actually a good beach day right now.
Yeah, you got some really good beaches over there. We lived there, I think it was like 93, 94. And I went back about 10, 15 years later, and the whole area we lived in had just expanded so much. But yeah, so just to let our listeners know a little bit about you, he is currently the Commandant at Joint Base Charleston Airman Leadership School. He has been in the Air Force for 17 and a half years, and he is also the host of a podcast, Wartime Leadership Podcast, which we'll get to in just a little bit. Folks, go check him out, subscribe, follow, like, hit him up on MySpace, all the above. But before we get going with anything, I'm going to put you through the same ringer that I put everybody else through. You're going to go through our 5 rounds presented by our sponsor, Giant Worldwide. Folks, head over to giant.tv/shadows and check out their leadership seminar. I got lots of great leadership information over there. I know you're familiar with Voices and Gears, so definitely go give them some love. Now, first question for you. You got 2 plane tickets. I'm giving you 2 plane tickets. First plane ticket, somewhere you've never been before. Other plane ticket, returning to your favorite destination. Where do you use them on?
One that I've never been to before, Romania.
Where at in Romania?
Anywhere.
We'll go Bucharest.
Anywhere in Romania. I've been fascinated with the history from the area. I love European history, moving more towards that Eastern European lifestyle and just everything that's happening in the area. It's one place I've never been that just kind of fascinates me.
Yeah. We went to Bronze Castle. It was really cool. It was really cool to go there, and kind of touristy. Like on the outside, they have, like, of course, everything Dracula you can find, knickknack. But Bucharest was all right. Food was good, but yeah, it was not a bad spot. What about the other one? Where's your return destination?
So return destination, I would take my wife and my son to the Philippines again. That's where my wife is from. It's been a while since she's seen her family. It's been a really long time, actually, since she's seen her family and everybody put together. So it'd be nice to be able to get her back home to see her mama. And it'd also be nice because we have a son now, right? So being able to have him experience where mama came from and the culture that is our family would be very, very important. The food is absolutely amazing, especially the street food. But Definitely the Philippines.
Okay. Next question for you. Book recommendation for our listeners.
Oh man, I am
You're in the
currently
office
reading.
too. Yeah, you got books
I am
all
in the
around there, I'm
office and
sure.
I'm looking around, but I'm pretty sure that I left the book that I'm currently reading in my truck. But number one would be the Bible. That's just where I find a large portion of my spiritual resiliency. But then also there is a new book out that is about your message. It's crafting your message and turning it into a business. How do you take it and cultivate what you already know, something that people already want to hear about? How do you craft your message to be able to put it out there? And it is absolutely amazing. I wish I could remember the name of the book right offhand, but unfortunately I can't.
Got Google. You're on your computer, I think, right?
I'm jumping on it right now, actually.
Yeah.
To
I'll stall
find
some
it.
time. Yeah, no, the Bible, awesome recommendation. Good leadership book too. And
Absolutely, all through the Old Testament and the New Testament. There's
not a lot of
plenty
people think of it like that, but it really is. It's a good leadership book. And then, the book that you're Googling, but you're on a government computer, I believe, so it should take a lot longer than the average
definitely.
smartphone. But we'll go to the next
Nothing can
question.
stop us, right?
Yeah, we'll go to the next question and come back to that. Go-to movie or movie. Better yet, movie series.
Ooh. Oh man, you're hurting my heart here. I had a movie already picked out. Like I already knew the movie, but it's not a series. But if I had to pick a movie series, it would be Star Wars 4, 5, and 6.
You're not a Jar Jar Binks Clone Wars kind of guy.
Dear Lord, no.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Pouty
not.
Anakin. No, pouty Anakin. You know what? So we're gonna go totally off track here, but for me, those Star Wars movies with Anakin, the best part is the last 20-30 minutes of episode 3. That's all you have to watch is Darth Maul talking. I could have gone without that. He didn't need to talk, but the transformation into Darth Vader, that's the only time. And then he like just destroys all the little Jedi kids.
Yep. When you see that transition, it's this pure hate just kind of building up, and it leads up so well into the 4, 5, and 6, right? Like just where he was, what his mindset was, how he transitioned in such a deal, and the destruction he brought in that moment. Just
betrayal. Yeah. What was your one movie you were gonna say?
Oh, dude, Tombstone.
Oh, I'm your Huckleberry.
Oh yes, you're a daisy if you do. I mean, come on.
Yeah. I like that movie so much that I actually read the book Tombstone recently, and I'm about to read Dodge City, just to find out, what was facts, what was, Hollywood. But oh gosh, the scene with Michael Biehn and Val Kilmer with the little duel with the tin cup, such a good movie. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. And so many quotes come out of that, right?
Oh yeah, and star-studded cast too. Have you found your book yet? Okay. Next one. Probably based off what has just happened, I guess it can answer this one. Most embarrassing moment that's ever happened to you?
Oh, most embarrassing moment?
Yeah.
As an MTI, as a military training instructor, I actually ran a flight into a wall.
And for those of you who are unfamiliar with that out there listening, non-military world, that is a legit thing. They will follow orders and they will walk where you tell them to walk. And if there's a brick wall in front of you, then they walk into a brick wall. So, all right. So that, I'm sure you heard about that from the rest of the TIs, the cadre there.
Oh gosh, yeah. Oh geez, it was out in front of everyone. But listen, I had griped at this flight about not listening. Listen, if I have to run you into a wall, I will run you into a wall. Well, I accidentally ran them into a wall, but they kept marching.
Yeah.
So
there was a guy at my basic training flight And it was on our Sunday where, your TI is gone. At least back when I went through it was. And this guy just looked absolutely beat. He was like falling asleep. We were supposed to be rolling our socks and stuff. And I was the house mouse. And so for those of you who are unfamiliar with the house mouse, I was basically the assistant to the commandant. And commandant, the TI. Oh my gosh, you can tell I'm PME. But he always dipped and he put it in one of those little monsters with the screw on cap. And I would always see him dipping in his office and putting his can down. And this guy just, like I said, he just looked absolutely beat. And I was like, hey, man, you all right? He's like, I'm just tired, man. I'm just tired. And I said, hey, go get you some of that monster, man. He leaves it out on his desk. Just go get you a little sip. And he's like, oh, you're gonna rat me out. And I was like, come on, man, I'm not gonna do that to you. And he went in the office, and sure enough, he took a big old sip of that supposedly sour apple monster. And during our amnesty hour, he actually told our TI that he did that. He's like, I went in there and sipped it, and the TI was like, and he's like, and I was throwing up for the next hour. He's like, well, good, you deserved it. You shouldn't have gone in my can. All right. God, what a good podcast just to talk about TI stories. There you go.
Oh, that would be nice.
Have guests come on and just tell all their stories from basic training.
I'd like to hear from my former trainees and just like what they experienced and actually hear their stories from their perspectives. I think that would be awesome too.
Yeah, you might not like what you hear, but yeah, that's probably good. Dinner for three. I love asking this question to people. Dinner for three. They have to be historical figures. They're no longer with us.
Oh, wow. I'll tell you right now. First off, Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt would be at the head of the table, just bull moose guy. Just let him go. Let him talk. Right, like the man's man. That would be number one. I would definitely have like the Apostle Paul, because here's a man that never spent any time with Jesus, but yet had all this information and all this presented, and just the way he led and the way that he delegated stuff was just beautiful in the mindset. And then my number three, wow, this one is difficult because there's a lot of individuals out there, but I would go with Abraham Lincoln. Okay. I would be very interested to hear what was going on in his mind as he was, working to move to free the slaves, what was going through, the inner struggle maybe that he might have had with some of the people that were on his cabinet with those discussions, just hearing about what those discussions were. Yeah, that would be my three.
Okay. And with the book recommendation, what we'll do is I might or I might not edit it out. We'll just see. But you got it
right here.
Oh,
I got it. It is Your Message Matters by Jonathan Milligan.
Your Message Matters. Okay. We will have that book listed under our book recommendations over on our website. If y'all haven't got a chance to check it out, I know me personally, when I teach every day, I bring in a book to recommend to my class, something that ties in with the lesson that we're teaching. And that's kind of where I got the idea from. But head over to theshadowspodcast.com, click on book recommendations. We got all of them listed there for you to check out. Now, let's start jumping into your story, the Chronicles of Nathan Coy. We're going to hear a little bit about your upbringing and to get where you're at now today with the Commandant duties and with the podcast. But tell us about your upbringings in Oklahoma City.
Grew up in Oklahoma City, went to Putnam City Original High School, graduated back in 1998. Yeah, I'm old. Come on, let's get it. Went into college to the University of Central Oklahoma. I didn't want to move out of my parents' house, right? Like I was comfortable living at home, doing great. They decided to pick up and move. They left me.
What'd they do? What'd your parents do career-wise?
So my dad he's a good computer programmer. So he sets up computer programs. At that time, he was working for Sprint PCS as they were starting out, really helping them develop up some of their systems. And then he later moved into the healthcare industry. writing a lot of systems for hospitals to help them better manage their records and other items like that. Mom was a stay-at-home mom for most of my life. She transitioned over to be a medical transcriptionist. So she was taking all those doctor's notes and typing them out. And at
But
that
my mom
time,
did.
it was on a typewriter instead of on a computer. So, you know, she got really, really good at spelling. I definitely didn't get that from her. It skipped a gene, apparently. I hope so, because whew, Lord have mercy. So they moved to Kansas City to follow Dad's career, and then they kind of left me in the dark. So I ended up having to go to University of Central Oklahoma. I started studying political science. Loved the people I was around. I was a member of the Acacia fraternity there at University of Central Oklahoma. Really was living a good life, racking up a lot of credit card debt, just living the dream, right?
There you go.
I ended up actually leaving college, didn't finish. I left after my junior year, just didn't finish. I worked in a couple of barbecue restaurants throughout that time, really started to learn the trade of how to properly smoke brisket and ribs. And it's a trait that I've carried with me. So every single base that I've gone to.
Does your cadre know that?
No. So let's go ahead and edit that part out.
Got it. I will not talk to any of them.
And actually, I'm pretty sure that they are listening on the outside of my door. So I'm pretty sure that I'm now obliged to bring ribs next week. So
yeah, or at least the Friday following the release of this episode.
Definitely. So I was living a good life. I was doing what I wanted to do. I was just free. But the economy kind of took a tank in 2003. So I started to look for new ways to be able to, live and survive. And my brother had been in the Air Force. He was currently serving in the Air Force. My father served in the Air Force back during Vietnam as a Chinese linguist. My brother was a Hebrew linguist and then transitioned over to F-15 load towed. So he handled all the ammunitions. So I thought, well, they did well with it. I think I'll go in just to at least get myself settled. I'm 24 years old, not married, no idea what's going on in my life at this point. I'm going to need to do something. So I joined with the intent of coming in and getting out, leaving as soon as possible.
Don't we all?
Yeah. And then it got a hold of me somehow, some way. I went to my first base, which oddly enough was Joint Base Charleston back 04 to 06 was when I was here the first time. I deployed out I actually ended up deploying for about 10 months. I didn't really value being in the Air Force, right? Like I didn't value the quality of the job. I didn't value the experience as much. It really wasn't until I was deployed. So I'm a port dog, aerial porter. So at that time I was working cargo. And so you're responsible for tightening down nets and, building up those cargo, getting it put onto the aircraft and sending it away to wherever it's going to go. I didn't grab onto what I was doing because I was at home station. I had never seen it in a deployed environment. Got to my first deployed location. It was 132 degrees outside. We're walking around trying to do this job in that weather. And I got to a pallet that was sideways looking, like the top of it was hanging over. And I was like, man, this is a load of crap. Like who in the world would build a horrible looking pallet like this? Who in the world is
You froze on me. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
became product excellence.
Can you hear me? You froze up when you said, who in the world? You got. Okay, it looks like you're clear now. Yeah, it froze up when you were like, who in the world would stack this? And then it froze up.
Well, so I said, who in the world would build a pallet like this? It looks like a load of crap. Like it looked horrible. And I looked on the side of it and there's a placard on the side. And I said, who in the world is A1C Coy? Oh boy, it was me. It was my name attached to that pallet. And in that moment, in growing up in the Air Force, or growing, as you quote, grow up in the Air Force, you start to learn the core values, but more deeply, right? Like you start to internalize them in a way. And excellence in all that we do became product excellence, right? That's a sub-core of excellence in all that we do. And I started to learn that. And that's when I got my really first big lesson in the military of what you do matters.
Mm-hmm.
In the chain of effects down the line. So I was aerial porter, ended up moving to Guam. I say it's the best assignment I've ever had because I met and married my wife there, right? So met her on the island of Saipan, got married on Guam. We left there a year later after getting married, moved to Andrews Air Force Base, Maryland. I was, home of Air Force One. It was a great job. It was a great gig to have for a while. Met a lot of really great people. Enjoyed the mission, like 100%. The mission was one of the best I'd ever worked. And then I got this email, April 1st, right? It said, "Congratulations, you have been nominated and selected for military training instructor." So for those that don't know, that's basically the Air Force version of a drill instructor.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, this is a great joke. April 1st, it's got all this official looking heading on it. I'm
somebody
like,
went all out.
Great. Yeah, I went up to the chief. I was like, "Hey, chief, look what somebody did." And he looked at me and goes, "Oh, you got selected, really?" I'm like, "Wait, what? This is not a joke." So I had to make a call to my wife because we had already talked about this before. Hey, there's these jobs that are coming open. They're developmental special duty. It's this new DSD process they're putting together. There's a chance I could get picked up for something, but let's hope that doesn't happen. Well, God's kind of funny that way. When we don't want something, he puts that plan into play, and I got picked up. I was scared, and anyone that knew me knew how timid I was. Right prior to going to that job, I was very, okay, whatever happens, guys. Oh, high five.
Well, I was
Oh,
just gonna say you are when you told me you were a TI when you came through the course, I was like, huh? You're too nice. It's too nice of a guy. How in the world is he gonna be in somebody's face screaming at them and yelling at them? And yeah, so it caught me off guard too.
And then that's exactly what everybody was saying. Like, they were laughing at the fact that I was picked up for this job that, you've got to be in the face of people, and I think the issue with the TI world sometimes is that we go there with this expectation of who we have to be. Mm-hmm. We go there with this thought of, I have to be this mean individual that gets into the face all the time, which, it has its place, right? Yes, exactly. It has its place. But I also learned really, really quickly that if you're not who you're meant to be, they're going to call you out. They are going to 100% call you out. And I learned to make it me. I had some amazing teamies. One of them, Holly Vaught, she's now a senior master sergeant up in Andrews. She was one of my best teamies I'd ever had, and somebody that I can rely on 100%. She actually was Blue Rope of the Year. I believe it was last year. She was the Blue Rope of the Year, which is the best of the best of the best. It's the top 10% and then the best of that top 10%. So she's absolutely amazing, but she is a friend for life. She's somebody that I can rely on. And that's what I really got out of that job was, here's these people that no matter where I am in this world, if I see that hat, right, sitting on the desk, I know I've got a brother or a sister.
Yeah.
It's just that kind of, family atmosphere. But I went there thinking I've got to go there and learn how to yell and do all that. And I became good at it, right? Like I used that tool.
I became a good yeller.
Yeah, I didn't lose my voice that much,
Yeah.
But, the things that really helped me make it, because that job, you're working up to 10 hours a day, 6, sometimes 14 days straight, right? Because that's that 0 week, you're working straight through that Sunday, going on to that next. And there was just thing, the divorce rate within that world is huge. It's really huge. And it's sad because some people didn't find places where they could fit in outside of that world, right? Like they were stuck in that world. That was everything that they were. And my wife and I were having problems. I would come home and be like, hey, can you please go get me a cup of water? And my wife would be like, yeah, I'll do it in a second. And I'd be like, no, I told you.
Like she's a
And, oh,
trainee. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And it was just this mentality, right? So we had a really strong church that we were relying on, a really strong church there, Gateway Fellowship there in Northwest San Antonio. Just a great group of people, great, they came around us. We found ways to be able to love on each other the way that, to fulfill ourselves outside of that world. I got to the point where I would get into my car, I would take off my hat and I would put it in my back seat. And I would physically, because I'm a physical person, I would physically touch a button to turn it off. And it was my way of kind of subsetting of saying, you're going home.
Yeah.
You have 10 minutes to get home. You need to turn it off. Learn to deal with it. And so it was kind of at that moment when I would get in, hit the button, and it was like a physical reaction was happening. I changed who I was. And then I'd get into the car going, back to work, and I'd push that button again, right? And I'd grab the hat and I'd put it on, I'd walk out. But it was, that job was all about building up the airmen that we need, right? Like it is truly developmental. There was, aspects where you have to, everyone thinks that you're just going in and yelling just to yell, but the whole point was to get everybody down to the same level.
Mm-hmm.
To bring everybody, your individuals that are hard chargers, along with maybe a little bit slower at some things, and bring them down to the same level so you could start to build them up the way that you needed them to be. The way that we needed them to operate in the military, the deployment mindset. If I tell you to do something, I need you to do it and not to question it. Now, what I also learned, and I share this with all the senior NCOs and NCOs that I meet, is you have to remember when they're asking why, they're not questioning you.
Yes.
They're questioning the process.
Yes.
They don't want to question, they're not questioning you to say, well, why do I have to do it? They're saying, why do I have to do this? Why this way?
Just trying to wrap their head around it.
Yeah, exactly. They want to break it down and then build it back up.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means making it better, which, in this day and age, we want better processes. We want better products. And how do we get there? But to ask our airmen to build them, to do it. How do we send them out to get done? But, the old hats, if you will, are still kind of stuck in this mindset of don't question me. Now, we love to say no, right? We love to say no. But what I like to say is yes, but how? How do we get this?
Well, you mentioned the whole questioning piece, and it's kind of ironic you said that, because before I got here to record with you, I was talking to someone about that, and it was I was under the misunderstanding that when people would question me with something, with, hey, why are we doing this? It's almost like, oh, you don't trust me, or hey, you don't think I'm capable. Where it's not that way. My wife, she is very much a why person. Or, we're talking about 5 voices. You've been through 5 voices, that guardian mentality of simply, I'm not going to be comfortable with something until I understand why we're doing it, or how we do it, or the purpose of what we're doing it for. Or I just need to be able to speak to it with someone else later on. And you're right. We're getting a lot of airmen coming through, especially they like to break stuff down and, figure out how something works. And they come in and they ask you that. And we're often, I don't know if it's like a positional power thing just to snap back at somebody, or if it's like an insecure thing to snap back at somebody when they ask you something like, why? Well, because I said so. Okay, that doesn't answer it. I didn't ask you who, I said why. And I think that's something we see a lot. And before we get further into your MTI journey, a couple of things to unpack on what you said. First of all, I love how you said your dad was a good computer programmer. I'm glad he wasn't a bad one. He wouldn't have been doing it very long. But when was that point? Was it before you became an MTI where you figured out what your purpose was in the military?
It's really difficult to answer that, because there was a moment before I went to be an MTI where I knew I was doing good. I was meant to be in the military.
We're going to go past your 4 that you had originally planned.
Yeah. Obviously, I got hooked, right? I
Mm-hmm.
got hooked on the idea of what could be there. The money kept me in. The
Lord, the money
fear,
kept you in.
I know it's weird. It's weird, but the fear of no money, I guess, would be a better way of saying
security.
This is stable. Yeah. I do my job. I go home. I get paid. It happens. There was a lot of time where, my family realized that the military is going to come first.
Mm-hmm.
It will have to, right? But the military is really good about giving it back too.
100%.
They will give back your time.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in the right job, if you have the right people that care enough about you. I always made sure to take care of the people, I hate to say that, below me. I took care of my airmen in that sense, because a lot of the time I wasn't taken care of, right? Yeah. And I think that I ended up staying in just simply because I found that security blanket that I could hold on to. But it really, my love for teaching, my love for the military came whenever I started teaching. When I was instructor, when I got to build something from nothing, to take an airman that he got so used to taking a needle out of his mom's arm, that he got so used to doing that, to taking out that needle, to putting his mom away whenever she was asleep, to just all these aspects. And then he saw his brother and sister coming up. The night before he left for basic training, he took a gun out of his 9-year-old brother's mouth. Like, the reason he came into the military was to adopt his brother and sister so he could get them away from the environment that they were in. You got to take time to get to know your people, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Until you sit down in a room, like usually about the 3rd week, I would see that they're not working well together. And I would say, okay, go into a room. We're going to sit down and you're going to get to know each other. You're going to find out what brought people here. And that young airman never talked up until that moment. And I asked him to start, bad job on me for asking him to start, because as soon as he started and he started talking about that history, I'm over here going like this, okay, guys, I gotta go to my office. The tears are, I gotta go sit down. And I would still listen, as he walked through this with the airmen that were around him, people that he'd spent 3 weeks with, but didn't know.
And 3 weeks of day in, day out, wake up, shut your eyes. You're around them 24/7.
Literally, right? I mean, you have to be able to gravitate towards something in another person, right? Yeah. You have to find that common goal that you can. The common goal was everybody came there to make it through. They were coming from something, wanting to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing to hear that story. That just kind of that made the foundation for me of that's what I was meant to do. I was meant to teach, to help people navigate through tough situations. I came back to the career field after 4 years. I ended my time at Airman's Week, back when we had Airman's Week, where it was a lot of facilitation. What does it? Okay, so you're an airman, big deal. What's that mean? And helping airmen kind of dig down deeper and find that deeper lining of why they're called airmen, right? Mm-hmm. I transitioned back to my career field. I did it for about a year, and I got called up to the group. I went up to the maintenance group here at Charleston to be the superintendent of process improvement and commander's inspection program. Did that for a year, got us through got some good training experience in looking deeper into people's programs.
What was the biggest change you noticed from pre to post MTI experience going back into your career field? Because for our non-military listeners, when he mentioned development of special duty earlier, basically what that means is you get tasked by someone in your leadership. They see something in you and they feel like out of these select jobs that the military had or the Air Force has, you'd be suited to fill one. I'm a DSD with as an instructor. He's now a DSD as a commandant. So the fact that somebody saw something in you, selected you as a TI, you go there, you come back. What was the biggest change you noticed in, I'm assuming, Staff or Tech Sergeant Coy at that time?
So I came back as a master select, right? I made master my last year there. Probably the biggest thing I saw was that before I went, I did not sharpen the tools that I had, right? I realized that I 100% allowed the dull edge to survive.
Yep.
Somebody saw something in me that I didn't see myself, and I needed to be shown that. And that's when I added tools to my toolbox, right? So the biggest difference for me was I came back assertive. I came back not the easy pushover. You're not going to be able to get stuff by me as easy. But I also realized I had lost a lot of my knowledge about the job when I came back.
Yeah.
Which is like the number one fear that every person returning to a career field has. I fear that I lose, but I learned that it was about the management side. So now I'm managing people, right? I'm leading people, I'm managing processes. So I had to adapt to that. So in being in the MTI world, you really learn. Miss P is great. Every prior MTI knows Miss P. She's the keeper of the schedule. If you don't keep the schedule, you're going to get a telephone call from her, and it's going to be a bad day. So I learned to be able to adapt and overcome in very quick circumstances. So having that ability to be able to think on my feet, to get moving quicker and quicker, I learned that I have to learn a much broader range. I don't have to be the subject matter expert in how to do that specific job, but I need to be able to get around and think quicker in all situations, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. That's good stuff. I hadn't heard this Miss P thing before. This is good insider stuff here. So is it like if you didn't have your flight at Chow Hall by a certain time, then you would hear it?
Yes. And the biggest thing was like, your haircuts and stuff, and it would say step at, and that's when it said step at 15:15, you had better be stepping out of that squadron at 15:15, because if it's 15:16 and you're not at your appointment at a certain time, like there was a lot of times when you'd be like, okay, double time, let's get
Miss P's coming to get you.
She's going to be there, right?
Yeah.
So you just learned to either put your flight at ease and tell them just to start booking it, or and I'm not supposed to be, don't put that in there actually. So you just learned that if you needed a quick time and you got to your appointments, because Miss P was going to be there to mark you off the list, and then she would be on the telephone with your IS, your instructor supervisor, like, hey, Master Sergeant Coy is not here. Where is he at?
Yeah.
They begin, you begin the text message on your watch, like, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Miss P got me. All right. Yeah. Well, so you said you went back to your career, and before we get in that, it seems like at this point your world started to change completely, because there was so much change that was on the horizon for you, and it seemed to line up right there with each other, because this is around the time you were coming to the enlisted professional military education instructor course in Alabama, which, I might know someone who teaches there. But you get, well, actually before that, it was 2010 is when you actually started the adoption process. So I know this is something that, was that date right based on our earlier conversation, or no? Nope. Okay, we'll edit that out.
He was 11 years old when we adopted him, but it was 2019. It was December of
2010. Whoa, I'm making him like 30 years old now. So we'll scratch that. Everything for you started to change when you come back as an MTI. You go back into your career field. You mentioned you had some time getting adjusted afterwards, but then you started the adoption process. And tell our listeners the story of, you talk about having a lot on your plate. You were going through the adoption process, and then you get told that you are now also picked up for another developmental special duty, and you were going to be the Commandant at Airman Leadership School. So take us back to that time for you.
Well, to be fair, I put myself through the interview process to be the Commandant. But the adoption process started back when I was working at the group, right? I had been picked up to go up to the group. A Port Dog Chief Guzman Gonzalez, G2, went up to the group to be the group superintendent. And so he brought me to fill a specific role. And it was just kind of like God's timing, right? Like there was all this stuff happening. When my wife and I moved, so we had some medical stuff in life that had kind of kept us from having our own child. And we always felt like we were called to be parents. We always thought that there was that feeling out there that we were meant to be. Mm-hmm. And we started the process in Texas originally. And then I got orders and we moved to Charleston. Well, we immediately picked up where we were and started the process once we got here, because we didn't know how long we would have, because in the military, you could get orders to go somewhere else in a matter of 6 months. You're gone, right? And so all of that hard work would be put away. So I started the process with my wife. We started going through classes. We started going through everything that the state of South Carolina requires. And I talk about these in the sense of comma, but God. Stuff happened that was bad, that was leading up, these, health issues, health stuff that happened, comma, but God. God came in, God did his interaction. So in the state of South Carolina, it's like hard, like 24 months is usually like the average time that somebody is waiting to hear back or to go through the adoption process. December of 2019, my wife and I were fully, we'd been through all the training, been through everything that we needed. And December 18th of that year, my wife was looking at her phone, looking through children. I know it sounds really, really weird to say this. It's almost like window shopping for a child.
Yeah.
Because here, I'm looking for my child, which one looks good. But we were looking at, descriptions, looking a little bit deeper, trying to find our child. And my wife, December 17th, we had just been approved. December 18th, sitting in bed at night, and she shows me this picture. Looking at kids like, okay, this one, and it was yes.
You froze up at the part where it said we were laying in bed.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So we were laying in bed, and my wife is flipping through, finds a picture of a child that she's interested in, and she goes, "Hey Nate, I'd really like to look into this child." And I said, "Well, why are you looking at my phone? Like, that's weird." Like, and then I realized that it was a colored picture, and I was like, okay, the website I'm looking at has all black and white photos. So I pull my phone over and I show her a saved screenshot of the exact same picture that she's showing me. Hers is in color, mine's in black and white. Exact same picture, two different websites, same child.
Isn't that crazy? That it's meant to be at that point.
Absolutely. So at that time, I immediately put in, an interest, we are interested in this child.
Yeah.
And we send in all of our forms, get everything in, and they tell us, okay, you're going to go through the process. It usually takes 30 days, but we're right around the Christmas time period. So this will go until the end of January. They have until the end of January. They pull together 5 families. They send out a deal saying, hey, this child is looking to be picked up. We're putting together a selection committee, just all this stuff. And then they take all 5 people and they sit down and they say, okay, which one is the best fit for this child? Everything's centered around the child, which is awesome. So we got selected to go hear Stanley's story, right? Stanley is our son. We get selected. We go up to Columbia, and my wife and I had already set up, like, there's these criteria that we just don't know if we can handle. Certain life events we don't know if we could handle. And course, they sit you down and they sit you in this little room, and then they say, okay, well, here's the story of Stanley. And they start reading. And of course, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is that one thing that was like the stopgap, like, we cannot handle this. First thing, they hit it up. We're like, oh my gosh, like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, how is this possible that this is the one thing, and it was almost like God was telling us, you don't have a say in this. There is not a single thing that you can say in this adoption process. This is your son. And we go through this whole process, and Stanley's got a lot of stuff. He's got a podcast story all to himself, right? Like, I'm not here to tell his whole story. I'm here to tell the portion of which we fit into. And sorry, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. He's been through a lot. He's lived a life that no one wants to live. He's experienced things that no one wants to experience. And they tell us, okay, so you can come back tomorrow and let us know what your answer is. And I said, listen, whether I tell you right now, or I tell you 3 hours from now when we're on the road, or I call you tomorrow and tell you, I can tell you that the answer is going to be the exact same. And I looked at my wife, Lena, and she looks at him and she goes, that's our son. Wow. Like, there's nothing that you can, that's my boy. So they actually allowed us, they're not supposed to, but they allowed us to go ahead and sign paperwork that we wanted to move forward. So we went ahead and moved forward, and we went up the next week, which now we're getting into February, went up and we got to meet Stanley for the first time. And actually the picture I have on my phone is of the first time that we ever met. And it was a great moment because, he's very small for his size, or for his age. He's very small, very short. And so I got down on my knee, like next to him, like, put my hand on his shoulder, and then Lena kind of did the same thing. And he looks at me and looks at her, and he's like, so he gets down on a knee. And I was like, oh man, okay, now you're going to rip out my heart. You're just going to do all sorts of things. And I would love to tell you that it has been peachy, but we went 2020 hit, right? We're at the very beginning of 2020. We go up there, we meet him.
So that was February 2020.
That was February 2020.
Yeah.
And then so then in, of course, March, everything happened with COVID. And we started to try to learn new ways. So Stanley, we had gone up to go to Columbia to meet him. Well, it was the first time he was coming down to Charleston with us. So we bring him down, we drive up, we pick him up, we bring him back. It's about an hour and a half each direction.
Yeah.
We get him down there, and then all of a sudden the military says, no movement at all. COVID, this new thing, COVID is out, no movement whatsoever. We got this child with us who doesn't have his medications. He has enough medications to get through the weekend. He has just a few pairs of clothes that he brought with him. And now we got him here. We're like, we can't take him. So he ended up staying with us for 10 days. Supposed to be 3. He stayed with us for 10 days. And I tell you, it was a blessing in disguise, because the minute that we saw him without his medication, like, they had him on all this Prozac type medicine, right, to keep him down. And we saw the real Stanley. For one day, we saw like this hyper, like really bad, like, screaming child. And then as soon as that went away and everything settled, he was very sweet, very, very lovable. And we're like, why are they trying to hide this kid? Like, this child, like, why are they trying to hide him from us, or from anyone, from the world? Because he's just amazing. And so it kind of showed us, we can do this. We can do this. He was 11 at the time when we adopted him. So he ended up, we did a few visits. The state started to drive him to and from. And then he came down full time to live with us in June. And then we adopted him 45 days later. We adopted him. Everything was legalized in the court. And from hilt to kilt, it was 8 months.
Wow.
It was a very short time, and it doesn't happen that way very often. Like, it was a very smooth process for us. 10 months. I apologize. 10 months. And it's been a learning experience, man. Like before I'd be like, okay, I understand about your kids, but I need you to come do this. There was no empathy there for parents. But now having Stanley, it has just, it's rocked my world, right? Like I have a huge amount of empathy for parents because I see and I experience as a dad now. Stanley's now 13, living, I hope it's the best life he could possibly live. He doesn't always appreciate it, right? Like he tests the idea and the concept of, love. He tests that theory all the time. But this job, now I'm the Commandant, right? It's a 3-year stint. It gives me time to be able to go home at lunchtime if I need to. Gives me time to be able to be home for the important things that matter to Stanley, like Taekwondo. Gives me that flexibility.
Yeah, you've actually got that going on today, don't you?
I do. He's coming up on a tournament next month, and so we're getting as much mat time as we possibly can.
Do you get him up there interacting with the cadre and doing outings and things like that?
This is a family, right? Like I have to take care of them as my family, and stuff happens within family. So whether it's the kids coming up during the day, I love having the kids up here. So all the cadre will actually bring their kids up. We'll do cookouts together.
And you don't do barbecue. You're a burger hot dog guy around your cadre, and you say your family.
You know what? You're really making me sound horrible.
No, I'm not. Really, I'm trying not to. But yeah, so
and even sometimes the students will need to bring in their kids because something will happen at the CDC or whatnot, and we try to breed that. So Stanley has been able to interact, and you see the way, like Jen, one of the instructors, she brings up Lolo, her son, and Stanley will take care of him while we're in teaching. So cool. You just see how his compassion and love of other individuals just comes out, and just the way that he takes care of people, unlike how he was taken care of younger in his life. It's really neat to see the protector come out.
Yeah, and that's really cool. He gets to see that, and that, like you said, that family feel. And I'm not going to ask you for details to this, but one of the things that sparked some conversation with us a couple of weeks ago was you were in a car ride and you were listening to Joe Bogdan's episode of Shadows. So if you don't mind, tell our listeners, like I said, you don't have to go into detail about it, but the importance of that car ride. Because I had something similar with my daughter back in early beginning of the year. She's going through this transition stage of 13, 14. And we made a 6-hour car ride to, coincidentally, South Carolina. And we had the best conversation. We didn't turn the radio on. We didn't talk. But, the value of not being glued to your phone. You could listen to something or just listening to other people's stories, but share that story with us if you don't mind.
So we were driving up to DC. I've been going up, and I took Stanley with me. Just wife was staying home. I think she wasn't feeling well or something, but I took him with me, and I started over the Shadows again, just from episode 1 with Chief Bogdan. And Stanley kind of wakes up during the midway through, and it's the power of connection, the power of words, right? They're just, the power that's behind them is just amazing. And even something, and I say this lightly, as simple as a podcast, 2 individuals talking. Chief said something during it where he was talking about, and he said, and that was the hardest moment of my life, or that was the worst day of my life, or something along those lines. And Stanley looks at me and he goes, yeah, mine was foster care. Well, what's the first thing I do? I immediately hit the pause.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, well, what do you mean by that? Because here's why it was important, Trip. He doesn't talk about his past as much.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't come out with stuff that happens regularly. The first time he ever did it, we were listening to an NF song, right? Like NF went through something very similar, and Stanley said, yeah, I kind of get what he's saying. And then I would be like, well, what do you mean? And he'd be like, oh, I don't know. And now we're at the point when he hears those types of things in those conversations where he will go, yeah, I know what he's feeling there. Okay. Feeling. What was he feeling? What would you say would be his feelings? And he opens up about his time in foster care, about certain things that happened, about the moment when he was supposed to go home with someone, or the moment when he was told no, or whatever the case was. It opened up a world of conversation that had not been present.
Yeah.
I had been present for him. I tried to show him, I'm here for you. I'm in this moment with you, for you, son. And it wasn't until it was literally a few weeks ago that we were driving, and he said, yeah, I know, mine was foster care. Let's start this conversation. And he opened up, and it ended up being about an hour and a half conversation between he and I over a simple phrase said on a podcast by one of my friends, and just opened up a whole new world.
Yeah, that getting that message from you, there's no amount of followers, there's no amount of downloads. Yeah, you got me kind of it's dusty in this room. But my dog's over here, it's dog hair. But that was the coolest thing that has happened to me since I've started doing this, because you never know the impact of your words, or if they're even reaching anybody. And hearing that and knowing that it created that moment for y'all, I could stop doing this right now, and I would say that was the greatest thing that's happened. So thank you for sharing that with me. And then we got you in contact with Chief Bogdan and Nina and all these amazing people. And you've got some amazing things coming up as well with Wartime Leadership Podcast. So if you don't mind telling tell our listeners about your podcast that you got coming up. And we're looking for guests that you got, launch date, the concept's awesome. So just tell us any and everything about your podcast.
So I don't have a launch date yet. It will be within the next month and a half-ish time frame.
So by April.
Yeah, by April, you will start to see it. Now I have an Instagram, wartime_leadership, that's already out there, where I post stuff Tuesdays and Thursdays. I get it out there because it's leading up to this bigger thing. This podcast was just a conceptual idea up until about a month and a half ago. And then the world just started opening up for me. We talk about resiliency a lot. We talk about physical, we talk about emotional, we talk about social resiliency, all these aspects. And the one area that we kind of hold off on, the one area that we don't focus a whole lot of time on, is spiritual resiliency. What do we do in those moments when we need something bigger than ourselves to rely on? What do we do in those moments where there's a sense of faith out there that we're not grabbing onto? And it looks differently for everybody. No matter where you go in this world, it's gonna look different for every single person, and that's good. Now, if I can provide a roadmap to help somebody find spiritual resiliency in one way or another, either by the way that I do things or by how somebody else does things, then I'm going to do everything I can to provide that. Now, it sounds weird because it's the Wartime Leadership Podcast. You would think it would be based on that leadership side, but each episode is going to be titled The Resiliency of, and then the guest's name.
I like it.
I like that idea. I think that the spiritual resiliency is important, because if any one of our foundational pillars starts to crumble, it will affect everything. I mean, construction individuals have understood this for years. If one pillar starts to decay, and if it goes completely, the others are going to start to follow eventually. So you have to be able to patch and go, right? You have to be able to patch. Sometimes it's a simple patch, and sometimes it's a complete reconstruction. And that's what I want to look at. I want to start looking at how people, number one, how do we define spiritual resiliency? And number two, how do you find it in your family, your work, and within yourself? What do you do to make sure that your family is spiritually resilient? And it's going to have some other twists in there. We are going to look at some leadership qualities, but we're going to be looking at it kind of from a biblical basis on that, because with me, my spiritual side, it resides in Christianity, right? So we use the Bible as our text. And so that's going to be one of those aspects I start to look at, is just different ways of looking at the same picture. Not everyone is going to see that picture the exact same. The frame is going to be different in some places, because I like silver frames while my mom liked gold frames. So I'm going to change out that picture. And in the same way, I don't do everything that my parents did to be spiritually prepared or spiritually resilient, because I am made up differently than they are. I still use aspects from them, but that's what it's going to look like. I actually will be recording my first podcast later on today. I'm not going to reveal who that is yet.
It's a good practice right here. This is good practice.
I've got I've already had conversations with 3 different people that have poured into me themselves. Probably the best one so far for me is the EQ gangster himself.
Oh,
right?
Noble.
Oh, yes.
Big
Man,
Trip.
that guy.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
Love Noble.
Oh, that guy. So he, but it's this whole group of individuals that have really started to pour into me. I had a guy, after I talked to you the other day about, hey, so I got my microphone. My brother gifted me, a very nice Yeti 10 microphone. This other guy gave me a stand and a balancer. And then
don't let people badmouth the Yetis. They're good.
They're awesome. Noble, we're talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
And we had this one guy actually reached out and said, hey, man, since I got out of the military, I've been doing a lot of production, other stuff like that. Would you mind if I put together your intro and outro? Yes. Why, yes, you can. And he asked me what I wanted it to sound like. And I know you're gonna hear this and you're gonna go, Coy, we just talked about that. But it's the mix between 300 meets Lord of the Rings type sound.
It's fine. I got like a game. I told them I wanted mine kind of Game of Thrones-ish, and that's what I want.
Yeah, that's beautiful too.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah,
it's this lead up. It's very, it's got the orchestra sound to it and stuff. It's really neat. So
even your logo's got that look to it, which I like. And your cover art's still looking good. I saw a little preview cover art that you had.
Yeah, it's it's starting to come together. There's a huge team that has come around and has just, thanks to you and others that have kind of paved that way. I'm learning from your mistakes, their mistakes, and trying not to make the same ones twice. So
yeah, I told you with mine, I do not like to. I'm not like you. I can't go back to the first ones and listen to them. Little cringy for me to do it, but I didn't really find my footing until I would say like probably around my rebound episodes. Episode 20, 21 is when I started to really get comfortable with it. Before that, I was trying a lot of new things. I was listening to a lot of people tell me what to do. You need to have someone speaking during your intro. And I tried it and I didn't like it. And then it was, you got to have this thing. I didn't like that thing. You got to go with what works for you. And in terms of those little things, and then like your even cover arts, that's a big thing. That's something I love making, are my own cover arts. And it's got to have
This is definitely where my passion is. I had to find where I fit in where I can fit my passion in. I know it's a niche. I know that not everybody's going to be into it, and that's fine, right?
It's your passion.
Important.
Yeah,
it's my passion though, and I'm going to feed off of that.
You've established what your purpose is. This is your passion. And I love the fact that what you were saying is, I mean, I just love speaking. I go speak at FTACs a lot of times about the, in the Air Force, you have the enlisted force structure. And in there, it talks about our emotional, physical, social, and spiritual domains of wellness. And what you mentioned is about those pillars holding up. And I always like to say it's like a table. And if one of the legs on that table, you're going through a relationship issue and now your emotional domain is knocked off a little bit, well, it trickles down. You quit working out like you used to because you're upset, and then it impacts your spiritual domain. And it's just, I think that's awesome. I love the concept, what you mentioned about focusing on the spiritual domain. I think there is a huge gap missing that one. And I mean, we all talk about social obviously on here, but physical, emotional, That's kind of what we focus on with the shadows. But I love the fact that you're like, we've got to talk about spiritual. And you're right, it looks different. A lot of people think it's just Christianity, but it could be meditation, it could be working out. It's whatever it is, that gives you that strength within. And you mentioned it, Instagram, if they want to find out more about any and everything wartime leadership, where can you send them?
So Instagram, wartime_leadership. You'll see it come up, black background, red lettering, with what looks like a Spartan helmet. That'll give you a good baseline. That's a great way to be able to get in contact with me as well. I will reply to messages very quickly. I've been known to respond back almost immediately, just simply because of the nature of what I'm trying to do. I'm in the hustle right now, right? Like I'm in that hustle stage of getting stuff out there. So I've got some great lessons. I've got some great books that are going to be coming out as well, working with an individual in DC for that. So you'll start to see some of those things trickling down on that Instagram account. So that's the best way.
Yeah, and we will keep our audience posted on launch date, guest, episode releases. You'll see some familiar faces from the shadows on there, including two of my favorite people walking the face of the earth, Joe Bogdan and Nina. How awesome is Nina? Joe's awesome. He knows that, but how awesome is Nina? She doesn't get enough love.
We had a great conversation. She revealed to me that she's not necessarily a go to church type of spiritual individual, but that she is spiritual in the sense of when she goes on a run, she sees, she sees that spirituality painted across the sky. And it was really neat because after we got done with that conversation, she actually she was going out for what she called her long run. And about halfway through, I get a text message from her, and it's a picture. And that's all it was a picture. And I knew exactly what it was that she was talking about. You can just see it in everything that happens. And so that was her moment that she wanted to share with me, which I thought was it was a great deal to be able to show the power of relationship. So
Nina and I have a completely different definition of what a long run is.
Very much so.
What I call a long run, Nina calls stretching. But she's incredible. She's actually, the time this episode's airing, next week's episode, Nina co-hosts with me. And my chemistry with her on the microphone is just incredible. I thought it was amazing. She was an amazing co-host. Well, what final comments do you have for our listening audience?
And first off, I'm blessed. I'm blessed to be here to be able to share the story. This is actually the first time that I've talked on a podcast regarding all things me. I don't like to do it a whole lot, so that's kind of a unique one for me. So thank you to you, Trip, and just being a part of this podcast is amazing because it has impacted my family directly and personally. And so by being able to maybe do that for somebody else is just as important for me. I hope that our story has helped in some way somebody else out there. Maybe if they're going through a struggling time, if they're looking for ways to be spiritually resilient, reach out to me by any means necessary. I will be there for you. If you're going through an adoption or you're going through a tough time with that, also reach out. We'd love to be able to walk with you.
Well, I can't thank you enough, especially such short notice. Like I said, I literally got back from the gym and was like, let's do this today. Like, let's just knock it out. And can't thank you enough for it. You've been an incredible guest. You're the first guest that got my allergies amplified a little bit in quite some time. And I just think you're incredible. Anything you need from me on this end, in terms of letting our audience know, I have no doubt about it that the awesome story, which thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing that with me on here, made it completely worth everything I've done since September of, was it 2020 that I've been doing this? So made every single thing worth it just by hearing those words and that story and making sure that y'all have that moment. It's absolutely incredible. And I can't wait to hear the feedback you start getting from people and hearing hey, you did the same thing for us. You're gonna do some amazing things, and I'm excited for it. So let's keep in contact, definitely, and keep me updated with everything, and we'll definitely push it out to our audience. But I know you're off to I butchered that. You were off to Taekwondo practice here pretty soon, so go enjoy some time with Stanley. Enjoy your weekend, and once again, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Trip.
Well, folks, that is going to conclude this incredible episode of the Shadows Podcast.